learners, welcome to our session today. I am your instructor CPA Ringo Frederick, a continuation of what you were doing earlier on. Recall in our previous class, we had introduced the concept of NPV, where on NPV we looked at several questions in relation to the same. We also talked about what we termed it as Xnpv. So in that case, we just gave it a mention. So in our class today, our concentration will be on Xnpv, which will dissect it so that at least by the time you're done with this class, you should be able to understand it clearly. Now, what is Xnpv? You'll find that basically Xnpv is just like the normal NPV, whereby we normally tend to use to discount our cash flows and comparing it with our initial outlay so that it should be able to assist us to know if the project we are investing is viable or not, right? Now, NPV, ideally, we were considering, or the main assumption was like payments were to be made in the future. Payments to be made in the future will be made on a regular basis with equal time intervals. That is what we said about NPV, that the payments to be made in the future will be made on a regular basis with equal time intervals. But for Xnpv, which we also term this as a modified NPV, basically in this case you'll find that it normally assumes that these payments are not made on a regular basis. In other words, you're saying that these payments basically are on irregular basis. These payments are on irregular basis, and really that is one of the main difference between, because you'll find that maybe at this point I could have received, say, like maybe a payment, say, in 2020. The next payment, maybe I'm going to receive it, say, like in 2023, for example, 2023. Then the next payment, probably I'm going to receive it in 2025. You see, in this case, this period is not regular. For regular period, ideally we're talking of 2021, 2022, 2023. This is regular period. This is irregular period. So for NPV, regular NPV caters for this. The ordinary NPV caters for this. The modified NPV, which you're terming it as Xnpv, caters for this. This is the difference that you should be able to do, that you should be able to identify, where NPV counts the number of period, whereas NPV counts the number of period, you find that Xnpv will do what? We'll be looking at the time period, that is a duration. Basically talk about the time factor, which is very key. Now, recall that this is a question that we did in our previous class. Recall that this is a question that we did in our previous class, right? Where we talked over the NPV, we worked out a question, and basically the full question, right? So in our class today, my good students, I want us to bring our focus to what we are referring now as what? Xnpv. Xnpv is what I want us to bring our focus on. Xnpv. So looking at Xnpv is also a very simple concept, because you'll find that it relates directly with NPV. So in this case, if I told you to look at a question here, I'm having NPV. I want us to get the difference, and you're having what? Xnpv. Using our formulas, where to start with NPV, basically we're having NPV, right? NPV tab, my rate. At this point, I'm going to take my rate to be 10%, which we're given our discount rate. The value in this case, given this illustration of ours, you will find that my date factor, look at our period 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, I'm having 6. Meaning that is to say 2022, 23, 24, 25, that is 26, I'm having 27, then 28. So in this case, you'll find that here it is irregular. So from 2026, the next period that I was receiving this payment was in 2028. 7, 8, 9, 10, then 10, you can realize that I'm having again from 10 to 2034. So basically, you will realize that here that again there's that duration that we've skipped. There's that duration that basically we didn't receive in 2023. We ended up receiving in 2034. So ideally, this one will also tell us that this flow of hours is basically irregular. But what will you do with NPV? For NPV, it will be the normal way whereby I'll be having the rate, I do comma, value. For values, of course, remember the concept of NPV, I'll just be picking that one, okay? In that case, I have all the values. We need to less our initial outlay, which is 10. Basically, in this case, that's why I'm having plus, because this is negative. So this will give us what? Our NPV. So ideally here, what NPV does, you realize that NPV ideally will be counting. In this case, it will be counting like I'm having 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It has counted 10 period. Whereas in reality, you're looking at what? 12 years. But for NPV, you'll find that it has counted 10. And this can be proved by using the PV factor. Let us use a PV factor. You'll find that if at all we want to prove this, let us use a PV function, basically PV, using the PV present value function, using the PV function to determine this. I want you guys to understand this concept very, very clearly. Using the PV function, look at it in this case. I'm having, of course, our period. So I'll be having basically our function here, PV. Tab, rate is 10%. Period, we start, of course, you can start from 0. Dash, in this case, what we'll have, I'm having the payment, which you don't have. Then future value basically is what you're having here, right? So because it is, can have minus that bit, so that as at the end of the day, it should give us an outflow, right? So in this case, what you can do, because rate is common, I can lock my rate. Then I drag this one down. So if at all you are to check on the summation of this NPV, look at it in this case. I'll have a slight difference because I'm having basically alt equal sign, where I'm going to take all of this case here. You see, I'm having a difference. You see this difference. Why do we have the difference? We're having this difference simply because you realize that my NPV was picking these numbers. Like for period 5, in this case, like period 6, it counted it as 5. Whereas this period 12, it counted it as what? As period 10. We can prove this. Check this one out. Now, assuming here we are having, say, like this, ideally, we know is 6, and here is 12. Let me just have them here. So, if this was 5, see what will happen. Currently, using our formula, this is what you're getting. But using the PV value, these are what you're achieving. So, this is the issue. Like, for NPV, it has picked this one to be 5. It has picked this one to, so therefore this will be 6, this will be 7, this will be 8, this will be 9, and this will be 10. You see, giving us this period. You see, it has given us the period that it has picked, right? So in this case, this is how this is how NPV ideally will generate its value. That's the reason why you'll find that if at all I'm having 6, and here I'm having, say, like, we're having 6, 7, 8. We're just returning it back to how it was, 10, 12. You see the difference? Because on this factor of hours, NPV basically will always tend to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But once we have used this, what you realize that it will pick this as what? As 6. The way we have it here, it will pick this as as 6, the way you have it here, So basically, in this case, you'll find that this is now what we will be achieving. Now, what about Xnpv, my good students? For Xnpv, the whole concept is just the same. What you're going to do, I'll do equal sign, right? Inserting the function Xnpv tab, my rate, values now I'm going to include year 0. So I'm going to pick all the values including year 0, okay? Then you do, of course, comma. Date, we're going to include for year 0. Then I close that, so that as at the end of the day, this will give us what? This will give us basically our Xnpv. This will give us our Xnpv. This will give us our Xnpv. This will give us our Xnpv. So ideally, these are what we ought to, this is what you're supposed to have. This is what you're supposed to have. And basically, this will be our Xnpv. Our NPV, ideally, we got it to be alt equals sign. Correct one was summation of all this, right? So you'll find that if at all you're to use the formula right, in this case, picking NPV and Xnpv, they are not far from each other. So Xnpv is as simple as that. So long as you understand that NPV basically, or rather Xnpv, it will be picking what? It will be picking the time factor. You see, I'm having a clear duration of the difference in time here. The same case you're having it at this point, right? Yeah, so that is what you're supposed to do. Now, the next thing that I want us to do, my good students, is to jump to our paper, practical paper that was tested in December 2022. I want us to see if we can handle the concept that you're given there. And this question basically was tested in which year? Let us check it out. That is NPV, just a moment here. Okay, this is how the paper basically was. This is how the paper was. Question number 23, and this is what I want us to look at. This is question number 23 in our final. This was an exam that was examined in December 2022. Practical paper. So let's jump and see what you're supposed to. So in this question, these are what you are told that you are evaluating a 4-year project with an initial investment of 10 million on 1st January 2023 and the following cash flows characteristics. So what we are told here is that I'm having the date factor and we're having our cash flows. These are what I'm given there. Then date, these are our dates. They vary as follows. The discount rate is given as 8%. So you're supposed to calculate the NPV and Xnpv project and hence determine whether the project is viable or not. We are also supposed to write the cause of the difference between the NPV and Xnpv and explain one you will use in your analysis and why. The aspect of IRR, of course, you'll also be looking at it when you reach there. So in this case, how will we work it out, my good student? This will be very simple, and these are the procedures that you're supposed to do. So these are what will be required to do. What I'm going to do, we are just going to take, of course, the figures it is. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to pick this one here, right? We pick the whole of this data set. I'm going to have it here. So basically the time, meaning that in this case what we are going to add is basically our, I'm going to have this in dates. So this is basically, we can have this in, what you can do, I can just be doing this quickly. This is simple, you don't need to use the shortcut functions to work it out. This one can just delete at once because there are few data, right? So on this case, basically I'm talking of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 period and with different time factor here, right? So first of all, I'll check my Excel is in which format. So I'll just come more function, custom. I want to check my Excel date, it is in which format. My Excel date is in month, day, and year. So therefore, to do that, I'll have to do this month, day, and year. So basically starting January 1st, 2023, 30th June, that is June 30th, June 30th, because it is month, day, and year, 2023. I'm having July 31st, 2024. We're having 30th September, so 09, 30th, 2025. Then you're having December 31st, 2026. So ideally, I'm just taking it in date factor, so I'm going to have my date as it is there, right? So all these should be in date, all these should be dates, right? So these are what I'm having. So I'm going just to pick this date of mine. I have it at that point because it is exactly the same thing. Now, once we have that case, our good examiner wants us to compute our NPV. So very confidently, I'll come and determine my NPV here. Our NPV, which will be equal to our NPV. At that point, of course, I'll be taking it equal to, let me increase this. So my NPV, I'll be taking it, NPV will be equal to, so basically I'll be having our function NPV equals sign NPV tab, our rate, you're given a rate of what? 8%, right? Let me have my rate here. Our rate, basically, we are told that our rate was 8%. Here it is our rate, 8%. See? According to our question, basically, we're given 8%. So I'm having 8% there. So once we have that in mind, you're going to take, of course, our equal sign NPV tab, my rate 8%. Our values, basically, we don't include our initial outlay. In that case, of course, we close that one plus or minus our cash outflow, which was 10 million. So basically, confidently, I can say that our NPV is that. What about our Xnpv? Xnpv will be simple because my Xnpv will be as follows. My Xnpv will be as follows. I'll be having, of course, our function, which is equal sign Xnpv. My rate is 8%. Our values, we start from year 0. Right? And basically our dates, we have our dates here. We have our dates here. So comma from year 0. Actually, this case we could have been having it as year 0. So tab. So you'll find that according to our case, our Xnpv, this is year 0. Actually, we're having year 1, year 2, year 3, and year 4. So at this point, my good students, you'll find that clearly I'm having a difference between NPV and Xnpv because our NPV is this 791,273, whereas our Xnpv is 1,062,559. The difference is, the main difference actually, you'll find that it is because NPV was counting it as basically numerical, like 1, 2, 3, 4, counting the period in that manner. Whereas for Xnpv, we are considering time duration. You'll find that at this point, basically, you'll find that it is within the same year. So I'm having what? I'm having different. My first receipt is on the same year that I invested. The next receipt was next year. Basically, this is after a period of how many months? After a period of that is of course almost 1 year and 1 month. Again, the next one I'm receiving in September. The next one I'm receiving in December. So what you'll clearly note here is that I'm having irregular time period, and as a result of this, my NPV will be different because it hasn't counted as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. It is considering the time factor, and the essence why you are putting what? Why you are putting the date factor. The main reason why you're having what? Why you're having the dates. Basically to pick and count the duration that we are looking at, So basically, like in this case, we've answered part A. Calculate the NPV and Xnpv of the project, and hence determine whether the project is viable. So how will you advise? This project basically is viable because we can see that our NPV is more than 0, or basically we're having a positive NPV, and also Xnpv, we're also having a positive Xnpv. So that is to say that this project of ours are what? Are viable. These projects of ours are viable because we are having positive NPV and positive Xnpv. So highlighting the cause of the difference between NPV and Xnpv, we need to explain which one you'll use in your analysis and why. So basically you find that the cause of difference is as a result of time factor, where for NPV it was counting in a numerical value 1, 2, 3, 4, whereas for Xnpv it was considering the duration of time. Like in this case, you'll find that it is picking the number of days since we started our investment, since we placed our initial investment. And that's the reason why you'll find that we'll be having the difference. So having that case, of course, you'll be having the 10 marks here, the first bit. The next area which I'll also want us to look at in our next session, basically, it is the concept of IRR. We can also go ahead and talk about what? XIRR. Almost the same concept as NPV, the same concept as NPV. So to this juncture, guys, I want us to meet in the next session and work out IRR and XIRR. Thank you so much. Let us meet in the next class.